Hello, this is Aaron Burton with Unconventional Oil and Gas Training. Thank you for joining me for another part in the mini-series, Benefits and Considerations for Multi-Stage Completion Comparison. Just real quick, a reminder how you can stay in the know in the additional resources. Also, be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel, and you can go see my video on demand training courses at uog.training. Another thing to consider is the services required for fracturing. With each type of system, obviously you have to have pressure pumping to execute your frac job. So all of them have pressure pumping on location. Other services would include wireline. You do have to have wireline with plug-and-perf operations. And also you have coiled tubing. With coiled tubing, you potentially may have to have it with plug-and-perf. It really just depends on how your tow is set up, whether you're going to run tubing conveyed perforations on coiled tubing for that first stage, or whether you have the cementable pressure activated frac sleeve. If you're using that frac sleeve, then you can avoid the coiled tubing run, but if you're having to rely on tubing conveyed perforating, you will have to have coiled tubing to perform your frac job. And then you also obviously have to have coiled tubing during the coiled-tubing-activated system execution. So with each of these additional services that are required, you have to be sure that you plan from a logistics standpoint so that you don't have one service waiting idle, waiting on the other. For example, you don't want your pressure pumping units sitting there rigged up and idle while they're waiting on wireline or coiled tubing to arrive. So you do have to plan accordingly there as to how readily available wireline is, how readily available coiled tubing is, and the logistics behind having all services there on location at the same time. There's some other things to consider with these services. First off, are wireline units available? Also, are perforating guns accessible? These may seem like silly questions if you're in the US, but at the same time, if you're in international markets or if you're in emerging markets where, perforating guns have a tendency to get caught up in customs, or the wireline units are really just not readily available there, it is a consideration you have to think about. Also, is the right size coiled tubing available? Because it's not only just is coiled tubing available, it's the right size to get down to the depth, be able to locate and function the tools. And you also have to consider, are the well sites accessible to coiled tubing? Because coiled tubing can be rather large, and you have to consider the weight and what kind of service road you have access to. If you're in the middle of the mountains in an emerging market, and the road to the well site can't handle the coiled tubing, you may not be able to get coiled tubing to the well. So that can be a big factor. Another option to the coiled tubing is a workover rig. You have to look at your situation and determine, is a workover rig a viable option for deploying those tubing conveyed perforations or opening frac sleeves with the coiled tubing activated systems. And you also have to consider, what are the costs of those services. That can play a huge impact on the overall economics of the systems. For example, if in one region coiled tubing is $40,000 a day and in another it's $150,000 a day, that'll have a huge impact on your overall bottom line and break-even cost of the well.